The cold November rain drummed against the windows of Gatcombe Park as Princess Anne sat alone in her private study. The fire crackled softly in the corner, but it did nothing to warm the chill that had settled deep in her bones. On her mahogany desk lay a brown envelope that had arrived that morning with no return address. Only her name written in careful block letters. Anne had been Princess Royal for over 30 years. She had seen scandals come and go, watched the monarchy weather storms that would have destroyed lesser institutions. But nothing had prepared her for what she found inside that envelope. Her hands shook slightly as she spread the contents across her desk for the third time. That photographs, documents, phone records, all pointing to one person who was about to become part of their family forever. Meghan Markle, the American actress who had captured her nephew Harry's heart, was not who she appeared to be. The first photograph showed Meghan at a private dinner in Los Angeles, just 2 weeks after her engagement to Harry was announced. She was laughing intimately with a man Anne recognized from the intelligence briefings as Marcus Anderson, a businessman with questionable connections. Their body language spoke of more than friendship. The timestamp on the photo was clear and damning. Anne picked up another document, financial record that made her stomach turn. Large sums of money had been transferred to Meghan's personal account from sources that weren't listed in any of the palace's background checks. The amounts were significant, enough to suggest that someone was paying for information or influence. The transactions continued right up until the week before. Her phone buzzed with a text message. It was from her daughter Zara, excited about the upcoming wedding preparations. Can't wait for Uncle Harry's big day. Meghan seems so lovely. Anne stared at the message, feeling the weight of what she knew pressing down on her chest. How could she explain to her family that their beloved Harry was walking into a trap? The intelligence report was the most disturbing piece of evidence. It detailed conversations Meghan had with journalists, conversations where she discussed private, royal matters that should never have left the palace walls. Phone records showed calls to reporters from major newspapers, calls that lasted for hours. The dates matched perfectly with negative stories that had appeared about other family members. Anne had always prided herself on being direct and honest. She had never been one for palace intrigue or gossip. Yet this was different. This threatened everything her family had worked to build and protect. She thought about her mother, Queen Elizabeth, who had dedicated her entire life to the crown. She thought about Charles, who had waited decades to become king. She thought about William and Kate, trying to raise their children with dignity and purpose. The rain continued to fall as Anne walked to the window, still holding one of the photographs. In it, Meghan was caught in what appeared to be a heated argument with Harry outside Kensington Palace. Her face was twisted with anger, her finger pointing accusingly at him. Harry looked defeated, his shoulders slumped in a way Anne had never seen before. The date stamp showed this was taken just last month. During what the press had reported as a romantic weekend together, Anne's personal protection officer, Detective Chief Inspector James Morrison, had delivered the envelope personally. He was a man she trusted completely, someone who had served the royal family for over 15 years. When she called him back to her study that evening, his face was grave. "Your Royal Highness, I must tell you where this came from," Morrison said, his voice careful and measured. "One of our sources inside the American entertainment industry has been tracking Miss Markle's activities. What you see here is only a small portion of what they've uncovered." Anne felt her heart sink even further. "There's more?" Morrison nodded grimly. "Much more. Audio recordings, video footage, financial documents going back several years, it appears. Miss Markle has been planning this relationship from the very beginning. She studied Prince Harry's habits, his friends, his favorite places. She orchestrated their first meeting through mutual connections." The Princess Royal sank back into her leather chair, feeling suddenly very old. She had always believed in love, in the power of genuine human connection. Her own marriage to Mark Phillips had been based on real affection and shared interests. When it ended, it was with mutual respect and understanding. But this was something else entirely. "What does she want?" Anne asked, though she already suspected the answer. "Money, fame, influence," Morrison replied. "More than that, She wants to change the monarchy from the inside. The recordings suggest she views herself as a modernizing force, someone who can bring the royal family into the 21st century, whether they want it or not. Anne stood up abruptly, pacing to the fireplace. The flames danced hypnotically, but they couldn't burn away the images she had seen. She thought about Harry as a little boy, so full of life and mischief. She remembered him at his mother's funeral, walking behind Diana's coffin with a dignity that broke everyone's hearts. He had suffered so much, lost so much, and now someone was taking advantage of his desperate need for love and acceptance. The phone rang, startling her from her thoughts. It was Harry himself, his voice bright and excited. "Aunt Anne, I hope you're coming to the final dress fitting tomorrow. Meghan really wants your opinion on." The morning sun cast pale light through the tall windows of Windsor Castle as Princess Anne made her way through the corridors she had known since childhood. Each step echoed off the stone walls, a sound that usually brought her comfort but today felt ominous. Under her arm, she carried a leather portfolio containing copies of everything she had discovered about Meghan Markle. Queen Elizabeth was in her private sitting room, reviewing the morning correspondence with her secretary. At 81, the monarch still maintained a schedule that would exhaust people half her age. She looked up as Anne entered, immediately sensing something was wrong. "Anne, you look troubled," the Queen said, dismissing her secretary with a subtle nod. "Sit down and tell me what's on your mind." Anne had rehearsed this moment 100 times in her head during the sleepless night, but now that she was here, the words seemed impossible to speak. "How do you tell your mother that her beloved grandson is being deceived? How do you shatter the happiness that Harry had finally found after years of struggle?" "Mama, I've received some information about Meghan that I think you need to see," Anne began, her voice steadier than she felt. She opened the portfolio and spread the first photograph on the coffee table between them. The Queen picked up her reading glasses and studied the image carefully. It showed Meghan at what appeared to be a business meeting with several men in expensive suits. The setting was clearly professional, not social, and the date stamp indicated it was taken just 3 days before the engagement announcement. "Who are these men?" Elizabeth asked, her voice giving nothing away. "According to our intelligence sources, they're representatives from various media companies and talent agencies," and explained. "The man on the left is Jonathan Phillips, a Hollywood agent known for negotiating lucrative deals for celebrities transitioning from entertainment to other ventures." The Queen set down the photograph and looked at her daughter with sharp eyes. "Go on." Anne pulled out the financial documents next, her hands trembling slightly. "These show payments made to Meghan's accounts from sources we cannot identify. The amounts are substantial, and they coincide with several negative stories that appeared in the press about William and Kate." Elizabeth studied the bank statements with the same attention she gave to state papers. Years of experience had taught her to look for patterns, inconsistencies, and hidden meanings in documents. What she saw made her face grow very still. "The timing is interesting," the Queen said quietly. "These payments occurred just before the stories about Catherine's supposed jealousy of Meghan appeared in the tabloids." Anne felt a mixture of relief and dread. Her mother was taking this seriously, but that meant the evidence was as damning as she had feared. "There's more, Mama. Much more." She produced the audio transcripts next, excerpts from conversations that their intelligence sources had obtained through legal means. In them, Meghan discussed strategy for handling the royal family, using language that suggested she viewed them as obstacles to overcome rather than a family to join. She talks about managing Harry's emotional responses and neutralizing potential opposition from William. Anne read from one transcript. In another conversation, she discusses how to use her mixed-race heritage as a shield against criticism, even if that criticism is legitimate. The Queen's face remained impassive, but Anne could see the pain building behind her eyes. Elizabeth had always prided herself on being a good judge of character, and she had genuinely liked Meghan during their meetings. The thought that she might have been fooled was clearly difficult to accept. "Where did this information come from?" Elizabeth asked finally. "Multiple sources," Anne replied. "Some from our own intelligence services, some from American contacts, and some from people within the entertainment industry who were concerned about Meghan's intentions." The Queen stood and walked to the window, looking out at the gardens where she had played as a child with her sister Margaret. Anne watched her mother's reflection in the glass, seeing the weight of decades of difficult decisions in her posture. "You know what you're asking me to consider?" Elizabeth said without turning around. "You're asking me to believe that someone we welcomed into our family, someone Harry loves desperately, is manipulating us all." "I know how it sounds," Anne replied. "I wish I could ignore it, pretend it doesn't exist. But look at the evidence, Mama. Look at the pattern." Elizabeth returned to her chair and picked up another document, this one showing a timeline of Meghan's public statements about the royal family compared to her private communications. The contradictions were stark and troubling. In public, she speaks about the honor of serving the Commonwealth, Anne continued. But in private, she calls the whole system outdated and irrelevant. She's already discussing plans to modernize the monarchy in ways that would fundamentally change. 2 weeks had passed since Princess Anne's meeting with the Queen, and the additional investigation had only made things worse. The intelligence reports that arrived daily painted an increasingly disturbing picture of Meghan Markle's true intentions. Anne sat in her office at Buckingham Palace, surrounded by files that could destroy her nephew's world. The latest evidence was perhaps the most damaging yet. Video footage obtained from a private security camera showed Meghan in heated discussions with representatives from a major American television network. The conversation, recorded without audio but clearly confrontational, took place just days after Harry had introduced Meghan to the family as his serious girlfriend. Detective Chief Inspector Morrison entered quietly, carrying another folder. His expression was grim as he placed it on Anne's desk. "Your Royal Highness, we've uncovered something that changes everything," he said, his voice heavy with concern. "It appears Miss Markle has been recording private conversations with Prince Harry using a hidden device." Anne felt her blood run cold. Recording him? For what purpose? Morrison opened the folder to reveal transcripts of conversations between Harry and Meghan that should have been completely private. In them, Harry spoke candidly about family tensions, financial arrangements, and his struggles with royal protocol. The intimate nature of the discussions made Anne feel sick to her stomach. "These recordings were apparently made as insurance," Morrison explained. "If the relationship ever soured, she would have ammunition to use against the royal family." More concerning is that copies appear to have been shared with certain journalists as background information for future stories. Anne stood up abruptly, pacing to the window that overlooked the palace gardens. Tourists gathered outside the gates, taking photographs and hoping for a glimpse of the royal family. They had no idea that the institution they admired was under attack from within. "We have to tell Harry," Anne said finally. "Whatever the consequences, he has the right to know what she's been doing." Morrison shifted uncomfortably. "Your Royal Highness Prince Harry has been asking questions about the increased security checks on Miss Markle. He seems to suspect that someone in the family has concerns about the relationship." Anne turned back to face him. "What kind of questions?" "He's been asking his protection officers about surveillance, about whether the family has been investigating his girlfriend. Yesterday, he specifically asked if you had raised any concerns about Miss Markle." The Princess Royal felt trapped. Harry was already suspicious, which meant Meghan had probably planted seeds of doubt about his family's acceptance of her. It was a clever strategy, turning Harry against his own relatives before they could warn him about her true nature. "I need to speak with him directly," Anne decided. "This has gone on long enough." That afternoon, using the excuse of discussing wedding security arrangements, when she arrived, she found her nephew in his private sitting room, looking more stressed than she had seen him in years. "Aunt Anne," Harry said, standing to embrace her. "I'm so glad you're here. I feel like everyone's been acting strange lately, and I don't understand why." Anne sat down across from him, studying his face. He looked tired, with dark circles under his eyes and a tension in his jaw that spoke of sleepless nights. Despite everything she knew about Meghan, her heart ached for him. "Harry, I need to talk to you about something important," she began carefully. "It's about Meghan." Immediately, Harry's expression changed. His eyes grew defensive, and he crossed his arms over his chest. "What about her?" "We've received some information that's very concerning," Anne continued, reaching for her briefcase. "I know this will be difficult to hear, but I need you to look at some evidence we've uncovered." Harry stood up abruptly, his face flushing. "With anger? Evidence?" What are you talking about? Are you spying on my girlfriend? Harry, please sit down and listen to me, Anne pleaded. This is about protecting you, protecting all of us. Protecting us from what? Harry demanded. From the woman I love? From someone who makes me happy for the first time since my mother died? Anne's heart broke at the raw pain in his voice, but she forced herself to continue. Harry, Meghan has been recording your private conversations and sharing them with journalists. She's been receiving payments from unknown sources, and she's been meeting with media representatives behind your back. Harry stared at her in disbelief, then started laughing bitterly. This is incredible. My own family's making up conspiracy theories about the woman I want to marry. Is this because she's American? Because she's mixed race? Because she's not from some aristocratic family you approve of? This has nothing to do with her background, Anne said firmly. This is about deception, about someone who's using you to achieve her own goals. Show me this so-called evidence, Harry challenged, his voice cold with fury. Anne opened her briefcase with trembling hands, pulling out the least damaging photographs first. She showed him the images of Meghan's business meetings, the financial records. The text message from Meghan had changed everything. Princess Anne sat in her private study at Gatcombe Park, staring at her phone as the implications of what had happened sank in. Somehow, Meghan had known about the confrontation with Harry. In advance, she had been prepared for it, had even recorded it, and was now using it as leverage. Anne's hand shook as she dialed Detective Chief Inspector Morrison's secure number. When he answered, his voice was immediately alert to the urgency in her tone. Morrison, we have a problem, she said without preamble. Meghan Markle somehow recorded my conversation with Harry yesterday, and she's threatening to release it too. The press. There was a long pause before Morrison replied. Your Royal Highness, that's impossible. We swept Prince Harry's apartment for surveillance devices just last week. It was completely clean. Then she must have had something on her person, Anne realized with growing dread. A hidden recording device that she activated when she knew I was coming to see Harry. But how could she have known? Morrison asked. The meeting was arranged. Only hours in advance, and we used secure channels. Anne felt sick as the truth dawned on her. Someone told her. Someone close to the family is feeding her information. The revelation that there was a leak within their inner circle made everything infinitely more dangerous. If Meghan had allies among the palace staff, or even within the family itself, then every move they made would be known in advance. We need to meet, Anne told Morrison, but not at the palace, and not at my home. Somewhere completely secure. They arranged to meet at a private club in London that Anne trusted implicitly. When she arrived 2 hours later, Reeson was already waiting in a secluded corner of the reading room, surrounded by leather-bound books and the quiet murmur of other members. I've been thinking about who could have warned Miss Markle, Morrison said as soon as Anne sat down. The list of people who knew about your meeting with Prince Harry is very short. Anne nodded grimly. The Queen's private secretary, my own secretary, Harry's protection officers, and perhaps 1 or 2 others. All people we've trusted for years. Morrison leaned forward, lowering his voice even further. There's something else, Your Royal Highness. We've been monitoring Miss Markle's communications, and yesterday she had a very interesting phone call with someone she addressed only as our friend at the palace. Did you get a recording? No, she was using encrypted communication software that we can't penetrate. But the timing suggests it was immediately after your meeting with the Queen 2 weeks ago. Anne felt her world tilting. Not only was there a spy in their midst, but that person had been reporting back to Meghan for at least 2 weeks, possibly longer. Every strategy they had discussed, every piece of evidence they had gathered, might already be compromised. We need help, Anne said finally. We can't fight this alone, not when we don't know who we can trust. Morrison nodded. I've been thinking the same thing. There is someone who might be willing to assist us, someone with their own concerns about Miss Markle. Who? Prince William. Anne was surprised.
Ow!
William. But he seems to support Harry's relationship. He was at the engagement party, smiling for all the cameras. In public, yes, Morrison agreed. But my sources suggest he has private reservations. Apparently, he's noticed some inconsistencies in Miss Markle's behavior that concern him. Felt a spark of hope for the first time in days. If William was already suspicious, then she wouldn't have to convince him to see the truth. He might even have evidence of his own. "Can you arrange a meeting? I'll reach out through secure channels," Morrison promised. "But Your Royal Highness, we need to be extremely careful about how we proceed. If Miss Markle discovers that Prince William is involved, she might accelerate whatever timeline she's working on." That evening, Anne received a call from William, asking if she would like to join him for a private dinner at Kensington Palace. The invitation was phrased casually, but it understood the real meaning. Morrison had made contact, and William was ready to talk. When it arrived at William's apartment the next night, she found him waiting alone. Catherine was away with the children, and the staff had been given the evening off. The prince looked older than his years, with worry lines around his eyes that hadn't been there a few months ago. "Aunt Anne," William said, embracing her warmly. "Thank you for coming. I think we need to have a very serious conversation." Over dinner, William revealed that he had been conducting his own quiet investigation into Meghan's background. He had discovered had left him deeply troubled about his brother's future. "I started noticing things at family gatherings," William explained. "The way she would steer conversations toward certain topics. The questions she would ask about family finances and private matters. At first, I thought she was just curious, trying to understand how everything worked. But then, Anne prompted. Then, I started seeing stories in the press that contained details only someone at those gatherings could have known." William continued. "Specific conversations, private jokes, even things the children had. The plan that Princess Anne and Prince William had devised was elegant in its simplicity. They would create a situation where Meghan would reveal her true nature to Harry. But it would require perfect execution and incredible timing. The wedding was now just 6 weeks away. And every day that passed made their task more difficult. William had discovered that Meghan was planning a secret meeting with several prominent American journalists who were in London to cover the royal wedding. The meeting was scheduled for the following Tuesday at a private dining room in an exclusive Mayfair hotel, according to William's intelligence sources. Meghan intended to provide these journalists with exclusive information about the royal family. In exchange for favorable coverage of her transition into royal life, "This is our chance," William told Anne during a secure phone call. "If we can record that meeting, if we can show Harry exactly what she's planning to do with the access she gained as his wife, then maybe he'll finally see the truth." Anne felt her stomach clenched with anxiety. But how do we get access to a private dining room in a hotel? And how do we ensure the recording will be clear enough to understand what's being said? William had already thought through these details. "I have contacts in the security industry who can help us. The challenge will be getting the equipment in place without Meghan or the journalists noticing anything suspicious." The next few days were a whirlwind of careful preparation. William's security contacts provided them with state-of-the-art surveillance, equipment that could be installed remotely and operated from a distance. The plan was to have the devices in place hours before Meghan's arrival and monitor the meeting from a nearby location. Anne found herself struggling with the moral implications of what they were doing. Was it right to spy on a member of their family, even if they suspected her of treachery? Would Harry ever forgive them if he discovered their involvement? But every time she wavered, she remembered the evidence they had already gathered and the threat that Meghan posed to everything the royal family represented. On the morning of the planned operation, Anne received an unexpected phone call from Queen Elizabeth requesting an immediate meeting. Her heart sank as she wondered if their activities had been discovered, possibly by the same palace insider who had been feeding information to Meghan. When it arrived at Buckingham Palace, she found her mother in the blue drawing room, staring out at the gardens with an expression of deep concern. The Queen turned as Anne entered, and immediately Anne could see that something significant had happened. "Sit down, Anne," the Queen said, her voice heavy with weariness. "We need to discuss the situation with Harry and Meghan." Anne sat carefully, trying to read her mother's expression. Had the Queen discovered their surveillance plan? Was she about to be ordered to stop their investigation? "I've received some additional information that I think you should see," Elizabeth continued, moving to her desk and retrieving a folder that Anne didn't recognize. "Our intelligence services have been conducting their own investigation into Miss Markle, independent of the evidence you brought to me." Anne felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. If the official intelligence services had been involved, then their concerns were being taken seriously at the highest levels of government. But it also meant that the situation was even more serious than she had realized. "What did they find?" Anne asked quietly. The Queen opened the folder and spread several documents across the coffee table. "They found evidence of connections that go far beyond what we initially suspected. Meghan Markle appears to have been cultivated by individuals with specific interests in damaging the British monarchy." Anne leaned forward to examine the documents more closely. They showed a network of relationships that connected Meghan to political activists, foreign influencers, and media personalities who had been openly critical of the royal family for years. They believe she was recruited approximately 2 years ago, Elizabeth continued, her voice steady but her hands trembling slightly. The initial approach was subtle, made through her Hollywood connections. She was gradually introduced to people who shared certain political views about the need to modernize or even abolish the monarchy. The implications were staggering. If this was true, then Meghan's relationship with Harry wasn't just opportunistic. It was part of a coordinated effort to destabilize. The Queen returned to her desk and pulled out another document, this one bearing the official seal of the Royal Household Security Division. "We've identified the leak," Elizabeth said, her voice cold with controlled anger. "It's someone who's been with us for over 15 years, someone we trusted completely." Anne felt as though the ground was shifting beneath her feet. "Who?" "Sir Marcus Davidson, my private secretary's deputy," the Queen revealed. "He's been in regular contact with Miss Markle since shortly after her relationship with Harry became serious. We believe he was recruited through a combination of financial incentives and ideological manipulation." The betrayal cut deep. Sir Marcus had been present at many of their most sensitive discussions about Meghan. He had seen all the evidence they had gathered, had known about every plan they had made. No wonder Meghan had always seemed to be prepared for their moves. "What happens now?" Anne asked, feeling utterly defeated. Elizabeth sat down across from her daughter. And for the first time in this entire ordeal, Anne saw something resembling hope in her mother's eyes. "Now we use Sir Marcus's betrayal to our advantage," the Queen said with quiet determination. "We're going to feed him false information about our next move. And when Meghan acts on that information, we'll have the proof we need to show Harry exactly who he's planning to marry." I felt a spark of renewed hope. "What kind of false information?" "We're going to make Sir Marcus believe that we've given up our investigation. We've decided to accept the marriage and support Harry's choice," Elizabeth explained. "When he passes this information to Meghan," she let her guard down, "she'll believe she's won, and that's when she'll make a mistake. The plan was risky, but it was also brilliant. By making Meghan think she had neutralized the threat from the royal family, they might be able to catch her in a moment of unguarded honesty." "What do you need me to do?" Anne asked. "Continue with your normal activities, but make it clear through carefully chosen words that you've accepted the situation," the Queen instructed. "William will do the same. We want Meghan to believe that the royal family has decided to embrace her completely." As Anne prepared to leave, the Queen took her hand in a gesture that was both affectionate and deadly serious. "What we're about to do will either save Harry from making the biggest mistake of his life, or it will destroy our family forever. Either way, there's no going back after this." Walking through the palace corridors toward her car, Anne reflected on how much had changed since that first envelope had arrived at Gatcombe Park. What had started as concern about an opportunistic actress had evolved into something much more dangerous and complex. The royal family was now engaged in a battle for its very survival, and the outcome would determine not just Harry's future, but the future of the monarchy itself. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the palace courtyard as Anne drove away. Knowing that the next phase of their campaign would require every ounce of skill and courage they could muster, Meghan Markle had proven to be a formidable opponent, but now they were fighting back with the full resources of the crown behind them. The morning of May 19, 2018, dawned bright and clear over Windsor Castle. It should have been a day of pure joy and celebration. But Princess Anne stood at her bedroom window, watching the early preparations with a heavy heart. In just 8 hours, Prince Harry would marry Meghan Markle. And Anne knew she had failed to stop what she believed would be a disaster for her family. The final trap they had set for Meghan had worked perfectly, but not in the way they had hoped. 3 days earlier, Sir Marcus Davidson had dutifully passed along the false information that the royal family had abandoned their investigation and accepted Meghan completely. As predicted, Meghan had let her guard down and made the mistake they had been waiting for. The mistake came in the form of a phone call to her American handler, recorded by intelligence services who had been monitoring her communications. In the call, Meghan discussed her timeline for implementing changes within the royal family once she became the Duchess of Sussex. She talked about gradually isolating Harry from his family, using her position to promote certain political causes, and eventually working to transform the monarchy into something more aligned with her personal beliefs. It was everything they had suspected and worse. The recording provided undeniable proof that Meghan viewed her marriage not as a love story, but as a strategic victory in a larger campaign against the British royal system. Princess Anne had listened to the recording. With Queen Elizabeth and Prince William in the secure briefing room at Buckingham Palace, the pain on her mother's face was almost unbearable to witness. Elizabeth had lived her entire life in service to the crown, and hearing someone discuss its destruction so casually was like watching her life's work being dismissed as irrelevant. "We have to show this to Harry," William had said, his voice thick with emotion. "He has to hear what she really thinks about our family." But when they finally played the recording for Harry 2 days before the wedding, his reaction was not what they had expected. Instead of shock or betrayal, he became defensive and angry. "You've been spying on the woman I love," Harry accused them, his face flushed with fury. "You violated her privacy in our relationship because you can't accept that I've found happiness." Had watched in horror as Harry dismissed every piece of evidence they presented. He explained away Meghan's words as being taken out of context, claimed the recordings could have been doctored, and accused his family of being threatened by change. "She warned me this would happen," Harry said, his voice breaking with emotion. "She said you would try to destroy our relationship because you're afraid of someone who might actually modernize this outdated institution." The most heartbreaking moment came when Harry looked directly at his grandmother and said, "I thought you of all people would understand what it means to love someone enough to fight for them. But I was wrong. None of you want me to be happy." Harry stormed out of the room. Anne, William, and the Queen sat in stunned silence. They had presented him with overwhelming evidence of Meghan's deception, and he had chosen to believe her instead of them. "He's completely under her influence," William said quietly. "She's isolated him from us so thoroughly that he can't see the truth, even when it's right in front of him." Queen Elizabeth had aged visibly during the confrontation with Harry. The voice was barely a whisper when she finally spoke. "We've lost him. She's turned my grandson against his own family, and there's nothing we can do to get him back." Now, as Anne prepared to attend the wedding ceremony, she felt the full weight of their failure. In a few hours, she would have to smile for the cameras and pretend to celebrate, while watching her beloved nephew make what she believed was the biggest mistake of his life. The early morning bustle of wedding preparations continued outside her window. Florists were arranging flowers, security teams were conducting final sweeps, and media crews were setting up their equipment. The world was gathering to witness what they believed was a fairy tale romance, completely unaware of the drama that had been playing out behind the scenes. Anne's phone buzzed with a text message from Detective Chief Inspector Morrison. "Your Royal Highness, there's been a development. Can you meet me in the secure room immediately?" Anne felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps they had discovered something new, some final piece of evidence that might reach Harry before it was too late. When she arrived at the briefing room, Morrison was waiting with a grim expression and a laptop computer. "Your Royal Highness, we intercepted another communication from Miss Markle last night. I think you need to see this." He turned the laptop screen toward her, showing a video call that had been recorded the previous evening. In it, Meghan was speaking to the same American handler she had contacted before, but this time her demeanor was completely different. "The wedding is tomorrow, and then I'll have everything I need," Meghan was saying, her voice cold and calculating. "Harry is completely devoted to me now. He's chosen me over his family, which means I can start him." Anne watched in horror as Meghan outlined her plans for the next several years. She intended to use her royal status to promote political causes that were directly opposed to the monarchy's traditional role. She planned to gradually alienate Harry from his military connections, his charitable work, and his remaining family relationships. "The beauty of it is that Harry will think it's all his idea," Meghan said, with chilling satisfaction. "I've become so important to his sense of identity that he'll follow me anywhere, even if it means abandoning everything he once believed in." Morrison paused the video and looked at Anne with desperate eyes. "Your Royal Highness, we have to show this to Prince Harry. This recording was made just last night. There's no way it could have been doctored or taken out of context." Anne felt a surge of renewed determination. This was their last chance to save Harry from a woman who clearly viewed him as nothing more than a tool to be used in her campaign. "Against the royal family? Get William," she ordered. "We're going to Kensington Palace right now." The drive to Harry's residence felt like the longest of Anne's life. She knew that if this final attempt failed, if Harry refused to believe even this clear evidence of Meghan's true intentions, then they would lose him forever. When they arrived at Kensington Palace, they found Harry in his private study still. In his dressing gown, despite the late morning hour, he looked exhausted and stressed, like a man who hadn't slept in days. "I don't want to hear any more accusations," Harry said before they could even speak. "I'm getting married in 4 hours, and nothing you say is going to change that." "Harry, please," Anne pleaded. "Just watch this one recording. It was made last night. After that, if you still want to go through with the wedding, we'll never interfere again." Something in her tone must have reached him, because Harry reluctantly agreed to watch the video. As Meghan's voice filled the room, describing her plans to use and manipulate him, Anne watched her nephew's face go through a transformation. The defensive anger faded first, placed by confusion and then growing horror. By the time the recording ended, Harry was sitting in stunned silence, his face pale and his hands shaking. "This was really made last night?" he asked, in a voice that sounded like a lost child. William nodded gravely. "Harry, I'm so sorry. We never wanted you to be hurt like this." For several long minutes, Harry said nothing. Anne could see him struggling to reconcile the woman he thought he loved with the calculating manipulator. They had just heard on the recording, "She really doesn't love me," Harry finally whispered. "All this time, I was just a means to an end." Anne moved to sit beside her nephew, her heart breaking for the pain she could see in his eyes. "Harry, I know this is devastating, but you still have a choice. It's not too late to call off the wedding." Harry looked up at her with tears streaming down his face. "How can I? There are 30 million people expecting to watch me get married. In 4 hours. The cathedral is ready. The guests are arriving. The whole world is watching." "The world will understand," William said gently. "The scandal will be terrible, but it will pass. If you go through with this marriage knowing what you know now, the consequences will be far worse." For a moment, Anne thought Harry might actually find the courage to stop the wedding. She could see him weighing the immediate embarrassment against a lifetime of manipulation and betrayal. But then Harry's expression hardened, and Anne knew they had lost him again. "I can't do it," Harry said, standing up and moving away from them. "I can't face the humiliation, the questions, the media circus. Maybe you're right about Meghan, but I'm trapped now. But I have to go through with it and hope that somehow things will work out." As Anne watched her nephew walk toward his bedroom to begin preparing for his wedding, she realized that sometimes love isn't enough to save someone from their own choices. Harry would marry Meghan Markle in a few hours, and whatever happened after that would be a consequence he would have to live with. For the rest of his life, the fairy tale wedding that the world was about to witness would be built on a foundation of deception and manipulation. And Princess Anne would have to stand in that cathedral, smile for the cameras, and watch as her beloved nephew sealed his own fate.